Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our virtual conversation with some amazing moms this afternoon. We're excited to see you coming in. We're going to be starting shortly, so please wait for us a couple of more minutes as we wait for some of the attendees to log in. Thank you. Okay, I think it's time to get started. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be hosting a very candid conversation with some super moms here today. My name is Jill Kubit, and I'm the Executive Director of the CLEO Institute, and I'm very excited to be joined by all the moms in our team at the CLEO Institute team with two very special guests, two super moms that I've had the honor to be working that have, the honor to have worked with for several years now. And I hope you find this conversation enlightening and inspiring, and will foster additional reflection and conversations to move us forward. But for those of you who may not know about the CLEO Institute, I wanted to take a few minutes just to tell you about who we are and what we've done for the past decade. The CLEO Institute is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization based in Florida that for the last 10 years have been building climate literacy, advocacy, and engagement. Founded by our great Caroline Lewis, a scientist who saw the need and the educational gap to build the kind of public will needed for climate action. She decided to found the CLEO Institute almost a decade ago, and she'll be joining us. She's here with us today. The CLEO Institute, partners with the most better scientific organizations, some of which you are seeing in our screens today. And we have been working with local communities with a top, bottom, and bottom top approach to build climate literacy. I want to take just a few minutes to show you what we've done and some of our programs that really enable us to bring the most better science climate information into the lay into the public, and hopefully you'll get to learn more about us. Do we have sound?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We have technical difficulties. Let's see if we can get that to work. Let's see if that works. Let me know. Is it working? No. Okay. Oh. Let's see. Let's do it for a minute. I'm going to stop share for a minute and see if that will help us. I think I got it now.
I want you to ask yourselves those tough questions, the ones we avoid, how we want to live, what do we want for our children, what do we want for our planet?
Our atmosphere
is so finely tuned for what we need, and we're treating it like a dumping ground, a sewer. The health impact of climate change is a global problem, and we see the results of that on a local level.
If we fail to act now, then we will leave behind a fundamentally degraded planet for our children and grandchildren, a planet that resembles the futures that have been portrayed in dystopian Hollywood films, unprecedented inundation of our coastlines, droughts, floods, heat waves, superstorms. That's the future that we will see if we fail to act on climate.
The CLEO Institute was founded in 2010 with the drive to educate and empower South Floridians to act on climate. Founded by Caroline Lewis, a science teacher by training, her vocation led her to understand what was causing people's apathy towards the glooming climate crisis: knowledge.
We're in the middle of the sixth mass extinction.
Today, the CLEO Institute is the #1 nonprofit organization for climate education, engagement, and advocacy. Through programs like the CLEO Speakers Network, CLEO trains people to become climate speakers by breaking down the science, impacts, and solutions. CLEO's educational efforts are backed by a world-class expert advisory council of scientists, environmentalists, teachers, and government officials. While the world is already feeling the impacts of our changing climate, not everyone is feeling it the same way. CLEO is a leader in the climate justice movement, providing the resources and tools to the most vulnerable communities in South Florida that are on the front lines of the climate crisis.
I wanted to be an outreach for them.
Building communities' resilience through women is the cornerstone of our Empowering Resilient Women program. By teaming up with community members like the YWCA, CLEO is able to empower and educate women on how better to prepare for more extreme weather events like hurricanes while building community. CLEO works to remove barriers and build a wider coalition to fight climate change across faith-based communities, elected officials, and municipalities, schools, and cultural organizations. One of the most important voices that CLEO continues to amplify is that of our youth.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Their Gen CLEO program meets regularly with students across the region, training them to be climate ambassadors in their schools and communities.
Dear elected officials,
this is a crisis. Do your job. We'll be watching.
CLEO recently launched its Climate Resilient Schools initiative to bring their program into the classrooms while building a robust climate curriculum for Miami-Dade public schools. CLEO continues to expand its engagement through multimedia outreach, including television commercials, social media, and billboards. With statewide campaigns like the Florida Climate Pledge,
I care about climate change, and I care about climate change because it affects everybody regardless of race, culture, and ethnicity. Because I'm passionate about the success of my future.
I like the CLEO Institute because it takes the time to educate people about the importance of climate change and the things that we can do to improve our world.
You can have your voice heard too. Fund our climate action work today. The future of Florida is in your hands.
Great. So it is with truly honor that I'm like to present our panel here today. We have the entire mom squad from the CLEO Institute. I'm going to call out your names and you can wave, say hello. We have Caroline Lewis, our fearless founder here today. Natalia Ortiz, our Director of Development. Laura Betts, our Programs Manager at the office in Orlando. And Aria Mckenna, our Social Programs Managers, also in Orlando here today. And we have two very special guests with us today, Harriet Shugarman from ClimateMama, and Jill Kubit from Dear Tomorrow and Our Kids Climate. And I'd like to take a little moment to speak about our guests here today because they are very renowned in working in the climate crisis. And Harriet is actually quite an amazing leader. She has been selected as the 2020 New York City Climate Hero, and in 2019 was featured at the Global Engagement Summit of the United Nations. She's the Executive Director of ClimateMama, an online community that reaches individuals over 110 countries and 50 states. As a leader and a mentor of the Climate Reality Project, Harriet has chaired the Climate Reality New York City Metro chapter and was the recipient of Climate Reality's 2017 Green Ring Award by former Vice President Gore. And I wanted to welcome Harriet just to talk a little bit about, some of her most recent activities and a very exciting book that she'll be launching out. And I wanted to give the opportunity to her to say hello and tell us a bit about her book coming out.
Thank you so much, Yoka. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be here and to be with the wonderful moms and leaders from the CLEO Institute and to be with Jill as well. And yes, I am so excited to share that my book is launching on Tuesday, on May 12th. It has been years in the making because of many of you actually that are here with us today, because of the voices of parents, mothers and fathers who are educating themselves to learn more about the climate crisis so they can help elevate their children's voices or stand behind wherever we're needed. So I am excited about my book, and I hope to talk a little bit more about it maybe with you later on, but I am also just excited to be here for you to be showcasing the voices of mothers as we approach Mother's Day, because as a mother, and I define myself that way, I think first and foremost, I'm a professor and educator. I wear many hats, as we all do, and that's our role as mothers, right? As we juggle and do many, many things. But for my children and for all of our children, I think it is our parental responsibility to address the climate emergency that we face and to speak loudly about it. And we've seen the rise of children recently and are hearing their voices, but that doesn't take the responsibility off our shoulder. In fact, perhaps it puts it on it more. So thank you, Yoka, for inviting me, and I'm excited to be here and participate in the conversation.
Great, thank you, Harriet. And I had asked her, just for the audience to know, that I had asked all the participants today, the panelists, to choose their favorite quote. And I had to say, I love yours. I actually love everybody's quotes. I always love quotes. And I happen to love yours because it talks about a renewable source, something that all of us climate advocates are always calling for. And if there's something that is renewable, definitely is hope. And we all need hope every single day. So I love that quote. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Harriet. Next is another special guest that I'd like to introduce. Her name is Jill Kubit, and she's the co-founder and director of Dear Tomorrow. Her work has been recognized by MIT, TEDx, Box, Public Radio International, Yale, and so many others. She's also a founding member of our Kids Climate Global Climate Parent Collaboration, which I'm very proud to also participate. And she's focusing on building three main areas on climate: creativity and culture, the parents' movement, and integrating social science and practice. She advises dozens of startups and leads social entrepreneurship and climate communication. So Jill, welcome to our conversation today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Dear Tomorrow and also about our kids' climate?
Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the program, Yoka. And I'm really honored to be here with you guys. I'm a big fan of the CLEO Institute's work, especially around the creative work that you've been building over the last couple of years, in addition to your educational programming. And of course, I'm really honored to sit next to Harriet, who was probably fairly modest in her introduction, but she was one of the first, if not the first person that I know of that really started thinking about and talking about climate change through the lens of parenthood and being a mother. And she's done a lot of groundbreaking work and allowed a number of us to kind of build off of that work. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to talk really briefly, hopefully, about two projects, and then we can get into more of a discussion. Mm-hmm. I currently lead or co-lead two projects. One is called Dear Tomorrow, And Dear Tomorrow is a storytelling project, and it's really a way of thinking about climate change and getting people to think about it in a much more personal way. And so it's a really simple ask. We ask people to imagine themselves in the year 2050, having a conversation with somebody who they love that now grown, or themselves in the future, and having that conversation kind of between the today and the future about what you did about climate change. And we ask people to write stories and share those stories with their friends, family, and people in their community. And then the second project that I've been working on that has been around for the last, I'd say 4 years, but really has picked up a lot of momentum in the last year, is the Our Kids Climate Global Network. And that is a network of organizations that are parent-led or family-friendly climate organizations. And we currently have 58 groups from 18 countries, and we're constantly expanding. So I co-lead that network, and some of the people in this group are part of that network. And so we're really out there to support new parent leaders, new organizers that are coming for the first time to be organizers, finding ways to support them through financially, through trainings, through mentorship, and we also work to amplify the parent voice.
Yeah, and I have to say, I as part of Our Kids Climate, and also having written a letter to my kids to the future, I have, I'm a witness and to say that when you really sit down and write a letter to your kids with regards to the climate crisis, is such a powerful experience. And I remember doing this with you prior to one of the past Mother's Day, and I wrote a letter to my kids, making sure I promised them I will continue to make this my life mission. And I really invite all of us here today to sit down and reflect and put pen to paper, because it's such a powerful, it's just a powerful experience that I wish everybody could take part of. So thank you for that, Jill. Next, I'd like to introduce our Director of Development, Natalia Ortiz. She's shown here with her beautiful family. And Nati, why don't you just give us a quick intro and tell us why you chose this beautiful quote.
As Yoka mentioned, I'm the Director of Development for the CLEO Institute. I came to CLEO about 3 years ago. I had no background in science or nonprofits, and I'm not a teacher. I'm an entrepreneur and invented children's products. And I was one of those people I knew climate change was real. I knew we had something to do with it, but I was not very concerned about it because I figured it was something that was going to happen in 500 years from now. So I never really cared so much about it. And it wasn't until I got educated and I went to a CLEO climate lecture, actually done by Caroline Lewis, and it just floored me. I realized then and there that it was I had to take this on as a responsibility and as an opportunity for me to really be part of this movement, because we all have different backgrounds, we all have different strengths and different passions, but we all have one thing in common, which is our children, and we have a responsibility to protect their future. We work so hard as moms to be, to make sure that we are raising these wonderful little adults, but we also have to keep in mind that, what is the future going to hold for them? So, which is why I love my quote. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We are literally borrowing it from our children, and therefore it is our opportunity as moms to really take action and move this needle forward.
Thanks, Nati. And I have to say that, it's such a privilege to work with you and the rest of our team. It's not surprised that we're all women, and at the CLEO Institute, we're a team of 14 women. Half of us are mothers, but one of the things that I remember that struck me about Natalia's story is that when she went into that CLEO presentation, for her that was her aha moment, because she was telling me, I used to feed them organic. I used to make sure that we would buy green products. I wanted to make sure that everything at home needed to be the way it should be. But then when she realized that the climate was being disrupted, then she realized, you know, what good is it if I cannot protect my kids' climate? What good is it what I'm doing if we cannot fix the biggest, you know, existential threat there is to their future? So thank you, Natalie, for sharing that. Next, Aria. So you are our, you know, newest member of our team. And we are so excited to have you. Not only you are a fellow climate reality speaker, as many of us here today. So tell us about, you know, a bit about your story and why you chose this wonderful quote. You're mute.
So yeah, my background, I grew up here in Florida, but I've spent about 25 years of my life elsewhere. I was pursuing acting in California and also in New York. And I always knew, I always felt like it was a struggle between pursuing my life as an actress and feeling creatively fulfilled that way, and wanting to have a greater impact on the planet, because from a very early age, I became aware that something was wrong. The fact that the creek running behind my grandmother's house was being polluted in Miami. When I found out that the coral reefs were dying, these were kind of like those little seeds that you follow throughout your life. And but it wasn't until my daughter was born up in New York that it felt like I had to start taking things more seriously and making sure that what I did was going to be in alignment with the kind of world that I wanted her to have and to inherit. So I started shifting. I was still working in my career as an actress and things were starting to work out. I was getting more of the types of roles that I really wanted, but I felt like the projects that I was involved with weren't really speaking to messages that I felt like were really important for us to be supporting and conversations that we need to have in the world. So I started getting involved more in storytelling and worked with someone named Jeff Abigov, and we created a series called Revolution Earth. We were writing it out, and the whole concept was to be able to envision this beautiful world that we would want, and to see what, and then to go backwards. So we're looking at this beautiful, sustainable world, and then we go backwards in time to see what steps it would take, what kind of societal shifts would be necessary in order to create that world, and what kind of technological changes we would need to support as well. And so in the process, I got to dive deep into understanding all of these issues, and then this became my passion. This is what I became consumed with.
So exciting. And just a quick question as to why did you choose this quote before we move on to Laura?
Why did I choose what?
Your quote.
Yeah, you know, it came about actually when I was working on Revolution Earth. I came across this quote, and it's extremely powerful to me because I feel like it's so easy. And I think honestly, as women, sometimes it becomes easier to step back and to not speak your truth. And that it is so important that we learn to use our voices, especially when our children's planet is in such imminent danger. So, you know, if none of us really steps up and says the things that are uncomfortable, we're going to let horrible things happen in the world, and we can't do that.
Thank you so much. So next we have Laura, who is our programs manager at the CLEO Institute in Orlando, also a fellow climate reality leader, and also a Green Ring winner from the Climate Reality and former Vice President Gore's organization. Hi, Laura. You want to say hello to everyone and tell us a bit about you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Betts. I am the program manager in Orlando, Florida, and I'm so pleased to be here. I feel really honored. Many of the people on this panel are my heroes. And I've been advocating for a sustainable, livable future for about 20 years now. I was trained by Al Gore in 2013 with yoga, actually. And ever since then, I've been on, made it my life's passion to do everything I can to solve the climate crisis. I chose this quote purposely because the climate crisis has already been solved and we already have the facts. All we have to do is wake up, by Greta. And the reason I chose that is because I feel like the children, the students are the most powerful advocates we have today to solve this. It's our generation that caused this, and I feel terrible about it. I apologize for it, but our superheroes are the children. It's powerful when they ask what their future is going to be like. Parents will be moved by that. So it's time to wake up, and it really is time to do everything we can to support these superheroes.
Great, thank you so much. Caroline, as you know, as a arsonist that you are, you know, known for and a trailblazer, I know you have your quote very close to you. You want to show it to the world what it is and tell us about, you know, how and why did you want to start the CLEO Institute and when did you realize you wanted to make this your life mission? You're on mute. Let me unmute you so you can go ahead. Go ahead, you're on mute.
Me?
Yeah, you can.
So my quote is this, it's that education is not just the filling of a pail, it is also the lighting of a fire. So creating a ripple effect in the audiences with whom you speak that get them a little bit riled up because the time is now. The question you're asking me, Yoka, my aha moment on climate probably happened in 2002 when I started working at a botanic garden and was creating programs to engage disengaged teenagers. And I came up with this program called the Fairchild Challenge with multiple access points across disciplines and in the community across generations. And it worked really well. It scaled quickly. It's annually engaging hundreds of thousands, and I did it around the world. So in 2010, when I was forming my own nonprofit, the scientists got a hold of me and they said, why aren't you focusing on climate? And I said, well, how bad is the data in 2010? And I said, you know, I really should be keeping up with this. So they sat me down and they showed me it. And the sense of urgency just took me by storm. And I just had to create the CLEO Institute to build climate leadership top down, bottom up, from frontline communities and elected officials and everybody in between. That said, I will tell you, I have two daughters that have watched me lose sleep and compromise my health for the passion with which I take on these engaging, disengaged audiences. And when I left the Fairchild Challenge and started CLEO, they said, Mommy, another one? Our worry pool is only this big. And what they were saying to me is, they were in high school then applying to college. They're worrying about college applications, student loans, and I'm telling them, you got to put this in your basket as well. So this 10 years later, both of my daughters are passionate climate advocates. And I want to tell the parents listening here, whether or not you think your kids are hearing you, I promise you they are. And that your drops, your nuggets of information and wisdom are getting through. And similarly, for the parents out there who have kids that are really intense about climate and you're not, wake up. These kids who are studying the science, the Gen CLEO movement, the CLEO has evolved and is really amplifying tremendously. They get the science. We train them in understanding what's happening and how quickly it's happening. And they are unapologetic in their demand for a livable world. So I would say the biggest thing you as parents can do, listening, is amplify the conversation. Understand that the urgency of the science makes it important that you develop agency. What can you do in your little neck of the woods? And every speaker today gave you some ideas. And so the idea of people don't like strong language. I like to say I'm trying to create a bunch of arsonists who will go and light fires and all of that. And that's too aggressive for some people. That's okay. You could take a softer turn of it. But I'll tell you the story of a man 4 years ago who got so fed up of me calling it climate change and climate crisis. And he says, why don't you just call it sustainability? And I said to him, why don't you look at the facts? And this man is now a leader in the climate change movement and an incredible advocate for climate action. So you need to call it what it is. If you have people in your family that only want the economic model, we have economic numbers to show them. If you have people in your family who really worry about legacy for the grandchildren, then you use some of the quotes you saw today that are so brilliant and so wonderful. So I think we all have a role to play. You just have to understand this. The science is urgent, and the need for you to get engaged, informed, and taking action is now.
Thank you. So I just want to share with you that somebody posted on the chat, Caroline, that the Fairchild Challenge inspired her daughter to study sustainable developments, and they're thanking you. So you lit, we know for sure you had lit many fires, but I wanted to share that with you. And somebody also is asking for Aria to post on the chat the Revolution Earth link, which sounds fascinating. So I'll continue because we have a lot to cover. And, you know, kind of going back to what we're seeing on the screen, Greta Thunberg today is the poster child of the climate movement. But women have been at the forefront of the environmental justice movement forever. You know, we know that almost 80% of the people affected by a changing climate are women for many reasons, you know, economic disparity, gender disparity, natural disasters disproportionately affect poor communities, and women make up the majority of that. There's, you know, again, no surprise why so many of us are leading this movement. And I think, you know, we, in all our stories that we have been hearing here today, the reason why we're taking this challenge so personally is because we as nurturers, as caregivers, we feel this is our calling. But I wanted to point out this, you know, just, you know, place this question out to you. Why is it that you think we take this so personally? It's such a monumental challenge. Is it that we feel that if we don't do it, nobody else will? Do we feel that we truly can make this happen? I mean, I know what I feel, and I'm interested in what you feel. I think activism is so important to bring awareness to this. But I think, you know, we as women and as mother have such a innate power to protect. And, you know, Mother Earth is what we all have in common, no matter where we come from, no matter what political party we align ourselves with or what religion we profess. The planet we call home, Mother Earth, it's something that it's in our DNA. And so I wanted to pose that question out to you. It's more like a reflection, but if anybody wants to add on to that, I guess, philosophical question, if you will. You want me to call out somebody? Jill, go for it.
I mean, what came to mind when you were talking for me is that I think a lot of the solutions that are out there, like that we already have, and somebody had a quote about this, that we already have the solutions. We've thought mostly about solutions in the past in terms of like the technical solutions, the scientific solutions, the political solutions. And we know we basically have them. We don't have the political will. We don't have the cultural will or the social will. And I think that what we're seeing is that women are in a position maybe through the relationships they have, the collaborative approaches that they have, or kind of the emotional work that they do, to be at the forefront of the kind of new solutions that I think that are out there. And I think the new solutions, the ones that we really need, are based on like changing culture, changing social understanding and being much more collaborative. So I think that's something that I see in my work, is that there are a lot of really, really interesting projects that are being driven by women, and really interesting organizing that are being driven by women. And people are not getting paid for it, or they're not getting paid very much for their work. But those are the things that are actually making a huge difference that I see.
Thanks. You know, the climate crisis is such a daunting, monumental issue. We are all obviously living a sort of different existential crisis, public health crisis with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I know, from personally experience that there are some days that I feel a little drained. And so that's why I love Harriet's quote so much about hope being renewable. So this question goes to you, Harriet. Such a big existential problem. What keeps you going and what gives you hope?
Yeah, it is. And some days, right, it feels impossible to get our arms around how big this crisis is, both the climate crisis, which is upon us, but it feels like we have more time, or as you rightly said, Yoka, the COVID-19 crisis that we're living right now, that's been dropped upon us, that also feels, are we ever going to get out of it? And I think there's so many similarities actually in the way that we address both, the way we talk to our children about both, and the way that we can create hope for them and for us in moving through these solutions. And I just want to switch back one sec to the question you asked before, because I think that many women on the front lines, many women that are in developing countries are the ones that have their connection close to nature, that are really showing us what's at stake, and their voices and our ability to also make sure we shine a spotlight on them. So and there's an organization called Women's Earth and Climate Action Network that I want to give a shout out to, that does that in a really big and powerful way. But what gives me hope, directly to your question, is that I see that we, and you demonstrate that through the CLEO Institute directly, we as a community are coming together on these big crises and these big issues. What we're doing in terms of right now, by here we each are in our own homes, we're not together, we're doing that to protect all of us. We're doing that to protect our grandparents, our fathers, our mothers, and we are doing that at great cost to all of us, financially, emotionally, every which way, but we're doing it for the greater good. And if we can do this now, and it's so hard, but if we can do this now, we can do the same thing for the climate crisis. We can take those hard decisions, and that gives me hope. And I truly believe that together as communities, that we can build active hope, not hope by itself. It has to be active, it has to be built on something, but it is something that we are seeing being created in action right now.
Absolutely, thank you. And I could not have agreed more with some of the comments have already said about the youth movement, the global youth movement, that to me gives me tremendous hope. There's so much research out there that show that kids can really can change their parents' minds. For those that may be a little bit skeptical still on the sideline, or being some sort of bystander. So I think to me, seeing the youth movement, it really gives me tremendous hope. And I want to share this next quick clip, which is a video that we created to call for parent engagement at the CLEO Institute, that I think can resonate with many of us, especially when we're gonna need to answer some hard questions coming from our kids if we don't act on climate. So let's take a listen.
Mom, Dad, we have to talk. When did you know that the sea level was rising? And the beaches were shrinking? By the time I was your age. There will be more plastic than fish in the ocean? That the water was getting so warm? The coral was dying? How did this happen? You knew this was happening? And you did nothing? Didn't you know that my future was at risk? Mom? Dad?
So, I think we're coming to really good, important questions. And I want to give this question to Caroline and also to Natalia. So if you could be the president of the United States in next January in 2021, what would you do on your first day in office? You go first, Caroline. You're on mute.
I was not born in the country, so I am not eligible to run, but man, would I love to be the president, at least for a week. I would implement policy immediately to draw down carbon in the atmosphere and to promote renewable energies. I would incentivize the economic models because, as someone said earlier, without the political and economic will, we will never turn this ship. And it is up to government leadership to make sure that we are heeding the science and that science is informing policy and the economic incentives that come with those policies. So I would do that for sure. But before I say goodbye on this question, I want to give a shout out to anybody listening who's not a mother, because I think a lot of us have a maternal instinct, even though we don't have children of our own. I know, for example, that every teacher, I've been a teacher for 25 years, every teacher, whether they have their own kids or not, feels that maternal instinct. Every nurse, lots of doctors. My husband is a hell of a mother. So I'm just kind of making this a little bit more inclusive, and that I think women really and truly are the change agents for climate. And as my husband says, he's one of these beautiful men who loves strong women. And he says, you got to run for everything, Caroline, because women run for office to make change, and men run for office to be somebody. And that's the difference in the sexes as he sees it. And he loves this wave in Congress of women coming up. So I would love to sort of incentivize political and economic will and to see a lot more women in politics.
Well, we have some chats that says, go for it, run for it, Caroline, run, run, run. Just so you know, you have your fan club here chatting for you. And somebody who mentioned that every time they see our video about the kids, they feel goosebumps, and I hear you. I get goosebumps when I see those kids too. Nati, what would you do on your first day in office?
I would implement term limits. I believe that part of the reason that we're in this mess is because our elected officials are making their careers out of this, and so they're holding themselves more accountable to the lobbyists and big industries, and not paying attention to what voters really want. So I think that term limits is an incredibly important thing, and I believe in my heart that more elected officials would do a better job at taking on this climate crisis if they knew that they only had 4 years to do it. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't do this because the results are not immediate, and therefore they don't feel that they're as popular. So that would be my first thing, implement term limits.
Great. So the next question is for Laura and for Aria. If you had a global megaphone, what would you tell the world? What would you ask the world with regards to what we're discussing here today? Aria?
Okay. Yeah, I think the first thing I would tell them is that this is urgent. There is absolutely no time whatsoever to wait. The other thing I was going to say about the president thing is to proclaim a climate emergency declaration on the first day in office, and to put together a panel focused on climate restoration. Because to me, that's the conversation we need to be having. We can't just stop emitting. We have to draw down, like I believe you mentioned before, and there are technologies available that can make that possible. So it is possible for us to solve it, but we cannot take small changes and think that's going to do it. We need dramatic system change, and we have to be prepared to do everything that it takes.
Thanks. Laura? Did we lose Laura?
Okay, going back to first day in office, I need to add to that to get us back in the Paris Accord, because that expires the day after. So that to me would be the most important thing, is to join the rest of the world. As far as a megaphone, I would do everything in my power to wake people up. And this needs to be a just transition. we need to make sure that the people that are harmed by the fossil fuel industries have a place at the table, their voices are heard, that this is a united movement throughout the country, and that we support each other, we share resources, we build coalitions, we do whatever we need to do to move this forward. And mostly just wake everybody up. It's an emergency.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna skip my slide because I think we're running out of time. I do want to say though, from my slide, from my own story, and the reason why I chose this quote, and the reason why I have become such a big advocate. I've always been somehow an environmentalist. I studied biology in college. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I live very closely and grew up very closely to the natural world because I live in so many wonderful places of our planet. And it was being close to the natural world that really made me love it. And I grew up watching documentaries of Jacques Cousteau with my dad. We would watch it on TV next to each other on television. And so that made me, really be in awe of the natural world. And I think one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about the CLEO Institute is the power of climate education, because, and this is the reason why this quote is so beautiful. We only protect what we love, and we only love what we understand, and we only understand what we are taught. The majority of the inaction that we see in many parts of our society today are because of lack of knowledge. And we see it every time we go into the communities and give our climate presentations. Just so if sometimes this thread, this huge challenge in front of us feels so daunting and people feel so powerless to make a difference. And with that, I want to kind of start invite all of you to start thinking some of the things that we can share with our audience here today of things that they could do at home to make a difference. And I want to share with all of you, with all of our attendees today, that we all as moms, as parents, as citizens, as humans have major superpowers that we need to be using, some of which are here on your screens. We have the superpower of our choices, of our purchasing choices, the power of our purse. We need to make sure those choices are sustainable and that are sending the right signals to the economic sector. We have the power, the incredible power of our voice. We're in the midst of a crisis, and we need to start talking more about this crisis. I certainly know that all of us here in this call today do, but certainly we need to make this issue more mainstream, and we can all become more educated. I invite everybody listening today that you can become a CLEO climate speaker or look for additional climate education and get yourself more informed. Better yet, you can write your letters to your senators or mayors or letters to the editor or write an op-ed. We need to tell our leaders that this matters to us. And finally, the power of our votes and making sure that we're putting the right people in place that will put the policies that we need to protect our air, to protect our water, and to protect our climate, and to protect our kids now and our kids' future. So I want to open to the panel to see if, what else could we encourage moms listening or other people listening here today that they can do, in an individual level. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Can I jump in, Yoka, and just follow up on the third, the power of our vote? I think to remind our kids and ourselves to be part of our democratic process. Voting is critical, making sure everyone's registered to vote, running for office, as Carolyn was talking about, but holding our elected officials accountable. If they want our vote, they not only have to have a plan, but they have to have a plan that's implemented right when they get into office. And we need to demand that they do that. We need to follow up with them. Our democracy, we can't take it for granted. We're seeing it stretched and pulled in this country, and it can't be partisan. It has to be all of us holding on to it and making sure it flourishes, and not that it's brittle right now, and we can't take it for granted. So I think we need to use our superpowers to stand up for, to support, and to build our democratic process in this country and not take it for granted.
Great, thank you. Nati, I think you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, I recommend everybody, if you're interested, the CLEO Institute has a Climate Speakers Network program, which I joined when I first started with CLEO. And what it does is it pairs you with a coach, and it gives you all of our slides and gets you comfortable speaking about this issue, from the science to the impacts to the solutions. Communication is key. And I think a lot of us sometimes shy away from talking about this issue, either because we don't feel comfortable or confident with the information, or because we're concerned about running into somebody that may challenge the information. So something as simple as signing up to become a CLEO climate speaker is an easy way to move forward and to just start the conversation. And the conversation, as you mentioned, can be extended into our elected officials. If the more engaged and educated we are, the more power we'll have when we're talking to our elected officials about what needs to be done to move forward. So I welcome everybody to join our CLEO Speakers Network if you haven't already done, if you're not already a graduate. Some of you I see here are, like Elena. But I think that's a great opportunity that everyone can take. It's a free program, and it's a great program and very empowering.
Jill?
Oh, I was going to kind of build on that, using the power of your voice. I think that one thing I've learned in my years of doing climate work is that the most important thing that I think you can do when you're using your voice is to find your own authentic story. Really think about like why climate change is important to you, why addressing this is critical, and it's in reflecting upon like the things that we care about, the things we love. Could be your home or your community, and experience you want to share with your child, but really doing some like deep reflective work. And then through that, you can create a way of expressing yourself that's authentic and that people can connect with. And so I just would emphasize like really doing some like thoughtful reflection, thinking about what is your story, and then sharing it with. It doesn't have to be, sharing it with people you don't know. It can be as simple as sharing it with your neighbor or someone in your family or your friends. And those are the people that you have the most influence over.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anybody else want to chime in? Anything else? Aria?
To using the power of your purse. I think that women or mothers especially are in a really great position to really think about the kind of choices we make on a daily basis. And, every single thing that we buy, everything that we put our money toward has an impact. And, I happen to bank at Aspiration, which is something that I really love, because when I travel, I can offset the cost of my fuel. They'll plant trees to help absorb the carbon dioxide. I don't yet have an electric car, even though I really want to get one. But there's so many ways that we can help offset if there's not, if we can't do what we really want to do. But then also every single product we buy, how sustainable is it? There are cleaning supplies that are made from companies that work in zero waste facilities, buying glass instead of plastic as much as possible. Local produce, planting a garden. All of these things make a huge impact. So as moms, we can educate ourselves.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna start wrapping up here. I wanna get to some of the questions and comments we have already coming in on the chat. I wanted to kind of end with this quote, and kind of really builds upon Aria's quote about Martin Luther King, and our and being part of the movement. because when we do sit on the sidelines, it really harms us all. And so I love this quote because it talks about empowerment, it talks about engagement and the civic engagement process that Harriet spoke about. And so I love Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote that says, "Our life begins to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." And so using the power of our voice and using the power of our vote and using the power of our purse, it's a way of letting people know that this matters. And then the other quote that goes back to back of Martin Luther King, which I have actually tweaked a bit, which says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemy, but the silence of our friends, which I tweaked to with our parents' perspective. In the end, our kids will remember not the words of our enemy, but not the words of their enemy, but the silence of their parents. And think this is a really powerful thing to remember. Will we be able to answer to their questions and of lack of action, or are we going to be able to say we did everything in our power to try to change our now and to try to change our future? So with that, I want to kind of close and start calling for some of the questions that our audience may have. We already have a few, and I'm going to field them up and direct them to who they were asked. And this one is for Harriet. And Veronica says, "Hi, I'm Peruvian and I'm loving this conversation. I would love to hear more from Harriet, her thoughts about the impact of the current pandemic in the race of climate awareness and the impact that humans have been causing to the planet."
Yeah, I've thought a lot about it. Thank you for asking that question. And I think that all of us on this call, speakers and participants, probably have as well too. And I actually will share some links after with Yoka, because I've written a lot about it as well. But I think that in many different ways, people are listening to our mother, to the planet, in a way that we didn't hear her before because there was so much noise. And I think that is making people, I hope and I think, feel more connected. And when we come out of this current situation, we will, I think, be able to call on that, both from with our elected officials, from a voting, from a powerful way to understand how important and how quickly our planet is able to come back. And again, not that she hasn't always been there, but maybe we haven't been listening as we are able to or forced to now. So I think that's something that's important, and maybe something that I think we will see us all following through. I do also feel that there's many ways that we talk to our children about the climate crisis that are very similar to how we can explain what's happening with COVID-19. And our ClimateMama motto, let me just share that with you, which is tell the truth, actions speak louder than words, and don't be afraid. And those are things we all teach our children. They're all things our parents probably taught us. So we need to, they know what's happening. They see what's happening. It's not normal. We're not going to go back to normal. We have to tell the truth in the same way we have to tell the truth about our climate crisis. We have to show them through our actions that we are doing something, whether it's helping our families, bringing groceries to neighbors, or really pulling in and pulling down on what we can do to address solutions to the climate crisis. And not being afraid is really tough, right? Because it's so scary, both of these crises. Because as Yoka said it at one point, they're existential threats in that way. So being able to understand that it's scary, that we might be sad, and we have a right to be sad because it's tragic what's happening in both crises, but that we are moving beyond, and to show our children that we can do that. So those are things that I would start with.
Harriet, that's awesome. But this just triggered in me that we have not mentioned on this incredible webinar. Thank you all, ladies. We haven't mentioned climate justice and the threat multiplier that these climate disruptions are to the most vulnerable in society. And when we look at the COVID nightmare that we're facing, I can only hope that this gives us the opportunity and that we will take it to hit the reset button in how we're living our lives individually and collectively. And I would say that the people listening got a ton of advice from all of us, and your self-awareness is crucial, folks. So give yourself 2 scales. How knowledgeable are you in your climate literacy? How much do you understand the urgency of the science, the seriousness, and the solutions? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning I know nothing, I know some people are worried. 10 being I'm a climate scientist and I know everything. Where are you?
You can put it on the chat.
I am like a 6.5 on the climate literacy because I know how much I don't know. The more I learn, the more I need to know. And then the second scale is your engagement scale on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being I do nothing, I'm on an island, leave me alone. 10 being I don't shut up about it, I am modeling it to the best of my ability, I use all my superpowers, and nobody wants to talk to me anymore when they see me coming. So where are you with respect to engagement at every level in your circles of influence? And I think that will help guide you, because if you're looking for ideas, we're full of them. But you need to assess where you are and where you want to be.
Thanks, Caroline. And so we have some people that are already putting their kind of rubric of where they are on that scale. There are some other questions. Natalia, I'm going to send this one to you. Taima says, Yoka and Caroline, I'd love to become a climate speaker. You're all inspiring, and I would love to take action. Thank you for your leadership. How can we become a climate speaker? What's involved? Nati, do you want to take?
Yes, I actually just put on the chat the link where you can sign up. And as soon as you sign up, you'll get an email with details on our next cohort. And if you're not able to join that cohort for any reason, we keep you on a waiting list and we just keep sending you the next time we open one. So just, you can sign up there into our general sign up sheet and we will be sending you information. The interesting thing with COVID is that we've had to take all of our programs online. And so we're currently doing our first Climate Speakers Network right now online, and it has been incredibly successful, and it's been really cool because we've been able to open it to everybody at a national and international level. So it's been interesting to see how our online programs have actually been quite successful because of this COVID.
Thank you.
So just sign up. The link is in the chat box.
Thanks, Nati. Another question, which I'll take, is CLEO doing any work in the Caribbean? We, while our offices are in Florida, we have done work nationally and internationally. Like Natalia just mentioned, most of our programs are now virtual. But Liz, please feel free to reach out to us, to our offices, and individually, we'll be happy to have that conversation on the sideline.
I've been in Trinidad. CLEO did a Trinidad Talks Climate in 2013 by invitation to elected officials and business community. It was pretty good, but they did not follow up with it. And Jamaica is knocking on the door, as well as Barbados right now.
So I want to read this comment because I think it's beautiful and inspiring. Basically, somebody just shared that let's be a family, a neighborhood, and a community of arsonists. So you have lit many fires out there, and many are thanking you all. You're all wonderful women and such a true inspiration. Before we just reach an hour of this conversation, but before we leave, I want to just leave it up to all of you to say, your last words. What would you want everyone to, take away from today? Anybody can go first. You can just raise your hand and take the lead. What would you like? And I think, Caroline, you definitely have said yours, but maybe last words from our special guests and then from anybody else in the team.
Sure. I think I just want to reiterate. Oh, thanks. What Caroline said, that and on climate justice and COVID, it isn't happening the same way to everyone, and everyone needs to open their eyes to that. And we, on this call, many of us can use our voices where others can't, because those least responsible are being hit the hardest and first and worst. And that is something that we need to work on. And I'm so glad that the CLEO Institute has a program and spends time and puts that at the forefront, because climate justice, environmental justice are hurting those least responsible for creating those problems, in the same way we're seeing it happen with COVID-19 now. That again, some of us are much easier able to protect ourselves, and in these ways than people, other people who can't. So I think, thank you. I want to thank you for all your good work, and thank you for putting climate justice front and center.
Thank you, Harriet. And one time I heard a great analogy once about, the climate justice issue. And it goes like, we're all being impacted by the climate crisis. It's like going on a cruise. We're all going in the same direction, but not all of us are in the same level. And that is truly a great analogy of what the climate justice issue is. But at the end of the day, we're all being impacted. We all share the same common roof called an atmosphere. And that's certainly something that we all need to be reflective of. Jill, any last, few words or comments?
I don't know what direction for the last word to go in. I think what I want to share is that people can be active and engaged, like wherever they are in their lives. They can be young or old. They can be working. They can be, staying at home with their kids. I think there's so many ways to get involved. And I think if we need to break through the old ways of thinking about like that all of the organizing was in a very kind of specific way of like, you have to be like a community organizer. There's just so many like fields that are connected to this. And so if you're like a creative person, or you are do like work on websites and do digital work, or you like to build stuff, there's just or you're a scientist. I mean, there's just so many different ways to get into working on climate, because it touches everything in our society. So just thinking about like the power that we all have with what we know, what we already know, and the skills and talents that we have, that we bring to the challenge. Just like bring yourself. And anyway, we invite people to really participate.
Great. Thank you. With that, I'd like to, thank you and thank our entire, panel here today, to the great CLEO staff. And I think Natalia wants to say a last word. Go for it.
I want to end it with something I read in a magazine that was very inspiring to me. And it's, the world is not falling apart before our eyes, it's falling into our hands. And this is something that I find very interesting, because the reality is that change is happening. We see it every day, and we are part of a growing movement. And it's not about what we do individually, but what we do as a team and as a group and as a movement. And then the last thing that I leave you with that's very funny, that my mother-in-law says, is the man might be the head of the household, but the woman is the neck.
Love that. Again, thank you for this wonderful panel, for your time, for all of you attending here today. We'll follow up with an email tomorrow with the recording of the webinar, and also with some resources. We'll share the link to ClimateMama's website, also to information about her upcoming book, and for Dear Tomorrows and our Kids Climate, for all of you to get to know a little bit more about those initiatives, and of course some of our resources at the CLEO Institute. And Harriet and Jill, if you have additional resources that you want to put on that email, send it out to us. Thanks for putting your website on the chat. Ladies, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful Mother's Day. For all the mothers on the call, have a wonderful Mother's Day. Every day should be Mother's Day, just like every day should be Earth Day. We'll see you soon on the next call and the next webinar. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.